She told herself it was just medicine. That's what she said. That's what she believed. Right up until the moment she was standing in a marble hallway at 3 in the morning, wearing borrowed clothes, breathing borrowed air, with no memory of when she had stopped checking how many steps it was to the front door. Not because she'd forgotten, because she'd stopped counting. Here's the question that lives inside everything you're about to hear. Was she ever really a prisoner? Or did she choose this one careful step at a time while telling herself she was choosing something else? Because this is not a story about a woman who was taken. This is a story about a woman who stayed. His name was Alexei Voss. The first time she saw him, he was bleeding out on the floor of a parking garage, one hand pressed to his side, the other curled around a gun he no longer had the strength to raise. His jaw was set. His eyes were open. He was in the process of deciding, quietly and alone, whether or not to make it. Any sane person would have walked the other way. She dropped to her knees, pressed both palms flat against the wound, felt his breath stagger and catch, and said to this stranger, this scarred, tattooed, dangerous man who had not asked for her, had not called out, had not made a single sound, "You are not going to die tonight." The terrifying thing is, she was right, and she has spent every day since wondering if that was a mercy or a mistake. Her name was Nadia Solis, and she was already moving, gloves on before her knees hit the concrete. Kit open, gauze out, fingers finding the wound edge with the kind of precision that doesn't come from training alone. It comes from a decade of night shifts where hesitation meant someone's kid didn't come home. Mercy General's emergency bay had taught her hands to work before her brain caught up, and right now her hands were saying, "Deep lateral entry, no exit wound, active bleed. He's got minutes." She didn't look at the gun 2 feet from his hand. She didn't look at the tattoos climbing his throat. She didn't ask his name. He watched her. Even dying, he watched her, with the focused, measuring attention of someone who has been the subject of many people's calculations and has learned to detect instantly when the math changes. "Don't," he said, one word. She still isn't sure if it was a warning or a request. She ignored him, packed the wound, applied pressure with both palms and leaned her full weight into it, 128 pounds of a woman who had learned long before this night that the most dangerous thing she could do for another person was stay, because Nadia Solis had built her entire life around not staying. Apartments with short leases, relationships with clean endings, friendships maintained at the exact distance where losing them wouldn't require grief. Stabilize, monitor, discharge. She was good at it. Everyone said so. She had repeated it to herself often enough that she'd almost stopped hearing the lie buried inside it. And yet, here she was, knees in a stranger's blood, hands on a wound that wasn't hers to carry, choosing, for a reason she could not yet name, to hold on. "You need a surgeon," she said. "I can make that happen quietly or loudly. That's the only choice I'm giving you." He held her gaze for 3 full seconds. Dark eyes, unhurried, reading her with an attention that should have been impossible for a man with a bullet in his side. "Drive me," he said. She drove him to an address 7 minutes away, a dark townhouse. A door that opened before they reached it. Men materialized from the periphery, quiet, positioned, the kind whose hands never completely relaxed. They took Alexei from her with the precision of people who had done exactly this before. She stood on the sidewalk, engine still running. keys in her hand. A man in a gray coat turned back. "Mr. Voss would like you to stay." She should have driven away. The logic was simple. The road was empty. The choice was obvious. She turned off the engine. And here is the detail that makes everything before it looked different. She told herself she stayed because the wound needed monitoring, because walking away from an unstabilized patient violated something in her she wasn't willing to break. Both of those things were true. Neither of them was the reason. She knew it then. She just wasn't ready to say it, even to herself. Especially to herself. Day 1. The room they gave her had ivory walls, linen sheets, and a window over a private garden. There was a lock on the door. She checked it twice before she slept, and both times confirmed what she already suspected. The lock was on her side. She chose to treat that as significant. What she hadn't decided yet was what it signified. In the morning, a woman named Petra arrived with coffee and folded clothes. Nadia's exact size, her exact taste in fabric and color, which she noted with a stillness she didn't let show on her face, and said, with the specific warmth of someone who had been instructed to be warm, "Mr. Voss will see you at noon. See you. Not thank you. Not your things are ready. See you." As though it were already scheduled. As though she'd already agreed. She wore the clothes. They fit perfectly. The estate was grand and cold, in the way that money becomes cold when it's old enough. Dark wood paneling, high ceilings, oil paintings of empty European landscapes, and heavy gilt frames. She counted 6 staff members in her first hour. She stopped counting when she understood she was meant to stop counting. Day 2. At noon, she was brought to the study. He was in the leather armchair, dark suit, open collar, exactly the way she'd found him, except that this version of him was vertical and assembled and in control of the room in a way that had nothing to do with the gun, which was nowhere visible. The bruising around the wound was still livid, but he held himself as though he decided that was irrelevant. She checked his vitals, changed the dressing, did not make conversation. He watched her work, not like a man who was bored, like a man who was cataloging. "You didn't ask me anything," he said. "Last night, when you found me. Most people ask. Most people aren't trying to keep someone alive," she said. He considered that for a moment. "Then does that bother you? Not knowing?" She pressed a piece of surgical tape flat and smoothed it with her thumb. "I know enough," she said. "What do you know?" She looked up at him then, directly. "I know the wound was close range. I know whoever shot you knew you. I know you weren't surprised." Something shifted in his face. Not quite admission. The shape of admission from a man who had practiced keeping the thing itself contained. He said nothing. She packed up her kit. "Stay with me, because the silence he just gave her tells you more about who he is than anything he could have said." And she knew it. That's what made it dangerous. Day 3. She found a newspaper on the kitchen table. His photograph. The name Alexei Voss, 36 in clean print beneath it. The word philanthropist in the 3rd line. She read it 3 times, then looked at the 6 men stationed between her and the front gate, and understood that the distance between philanthropist and prisoner was exactly the width of a headline. Day 4. He asked her to dinner, not loudly, not warmly, simply in the same direct, unbrokered way he spoke, as though softening requests was a skill he'd never acquired because it had never been necessary. She came, dark fabric, silver bracelets catching the candlelight. They talked about cities, food, work. He asked about emergency medicine with the focused curiosity of a man who is actually listening, which is different from a man who is waiting for his turn to speak. She noticed the difference. She didn't comment on it. Once she asked about the scar. His right hand, dark tattoo patterns running to his knuckles, rose to it without his permission. A reflex, the back of one finger touching the ridge of it. "Hold argument," he said. "Who won?" He looked at her steadily. "I'm here. The other person isn't." She should have felt the ice in that. A reasonable woman, fully informed, would have noted the temperature of those words and pulled back. She felt, instead, something clarify, as if her vision had adjusted to a dark room and suddenly the furniture had edges. Without thinking, she turned her grandmother's ring, a single clear stone on a delicate silver band, worn every day for 4 years. Not a love ring, a grounding ring, a you-are-still-yourself ring. She turned it once, twice, a habit so old it happened below thought, and realized, with a precision that frightened her, that the ring felt different tonight. Not heavier, just insufficient. That was the moment, not the parking garage, not the locked estate, that dinner, that sentence, that reflex of his hand, that involuntary reach for her own anchor. That was when Nadia Solis understood she was in serious trouble, and that the trouble had nothing to do with the men stationed at the perimeter. Day 6. His surgeon, Dr. Farrow, compact, precise, a man who clearly operated across multiple worlds and commented on none of them, cleared Alexei for limited movement. Nadia resumed wound care, told herself it was professional continuity, told herself the same thing she always told herself in the same practiced language. She was changing his dressing when he said, "You're angry, you're both." She pressed the tape down with slightly more force than necessary. He didn't move. "You could have let me leave day 1, she said. Her voice was steady. Her hands were steady. Everything was steady the way things go steady when you've made a decision to be steady. You could have thanked me and sent me home, and I would have disappeared, and none of this would exist." He didn't answer immediately. She pulled on a fresh glove, smoothed the dressing edge. "Why didn't you?" she said. He was quiet for long enough that she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, without looking away, "I've had people look at me like—" He stopped. His thumb pressed into the side of the glass hard enough that the water shifted, started again. "On that floor, you were the first person in." He stopped again. Set the glass down. The tattoos on his fingers were still. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The fact that Alexei Voss, a man who spoke in completed, controlled sentences the way other men breathed, could not finish this sentence, told her more than the words would have. She didn't answer. She packed her kit. But her hands, for the first time in 6 days, were not perfectly steady. Day 8. You think you understand this man now. Hold that thought, because day 8 is when the walls come down, and what's behind them is not what you've been told. A man named Dovrak arrived. She saw him from the upper hallway, heavy-set, white-haired, moving through the front door with the ease of someone who's never once negotiated for entry into a room. The staff didn't speak when he passed. They repositioned. There's a difference between those two things, and it's the difference between respect and fear. Alexei met him in the study. The door closed. She didn't hear words. She heard cadence. Alexei's voice low and even, Dovrak's higher and pushing. The specific aggression of a man who uses volume the way other men use weapons. Then silence. Then a sound she had learned to identify in 12 years of emergency medicine. The hollow, specific percussion of impact against a body that doesn't buckle. Then silence again. She did not go downstairs. In the morning, Alexei came to breakfast with a bruise along his jaw that had not been there the previous evening. He sat down, poured his coffee, looked at her across the table. She looked at the bruise. He looked back at her. Neither of them said anything, but something passed between them in that silence, something that had weight and warmth, and a shape she recognized from rooms where people are trying very hard not to need each other. She pushed a plate of food toward him. He ate. Day 9. She found the room by accident. East wing. Third door. Left unlocked. Later, she would wonder if unlocked was the right word, or whether left open for her was closer to accurate. She'd been looking for a linen closet. What she found instead was a desk, a lamp, and a life's worth of organized surveillance. Files, photographs, newspaper clippings cross-hatched with handwritten margin notes. A city map with red pen markings pressed hard enough to ghost through multiple layers. She stood in the doorway for 3 full seconds, cataloging without touching. Then she stepped inside. She opened the first file folder. Stop. Right here. Because what she's about to find does not just change her situation. It rewrites the entire story you thought you were watching. The photographs were of her, not taken inside the estate. These were weeks old. Her hospital badge photo. Her apartment building entrance. Her car, silver gray, parked in the Mercy General garage on the night shift she worked before the night she found him. A photograph of her walking to the hospital entrance, coat collar up, head down against the wind, time-stamped precisely. She turned the page with hands that had gone clinical. Not calm, but performing calm the way she'd been trained. Underneath the photographs, a typed document. A name at the top that was not hers. A physical description that was a schedule. A notation of her reporting habits, specifically a case 3 months prior. A patient with a knife wound. Her accurate incident report. A red ink notation beside it. Problem created. She read it twice, stood with it for a moment. Then she walked back to the main hall, down the stairs, through the corridor, out to the back terrace, where Alexei was standing with a glass of water, looking at the garden with the specific stillness of a man who is waiting for something to arrive. He heard her, turned, saw her face. His expression did not collapse. It settled. The way a man's expression settles when a weight he's been carrying has finally been set down by someone else's hands. "You knew who I was," she said. "Yes, before the garage." "Before any of it." "Yes." She held the photograph up, his photograph of her. This was a decision. Someone made a decision. He set down his glass. He didn't move toward her or away from her. He stood in the particular stillness of a man choosing his words not for smoothness, but for accuracy. Dovrak was going to... Don't. She held up the photo. Don't start with him. Start with this. How long? A beat. 3 months. 3 months you watched me. 3 months I knew what Dovrak was building, your incident report, his nephew. You created a problem for him, and you didn't even know it existed. So you decided to, what? Intercept me? Bleed on my floor and hope The shooting was real. His voice dropped, flattened. The location was my choice. She let that land. felt it settle into the architecture of every moment she'd spent in this house, rearranging what she thought she knew. And the room, the clothes in my exact size, the lock on my side of the door. Her voice was quiet now, quiet the way scalpels are quiet. You built a cage that felt like a choice. He didn't flinch, but something behind his eyes went very still, the way things go still when they're bracing. I put myself between you and something that was coming for you regardless. His voice dropped slightly. You can call that use. I call it the only move I had. And if I hadn't found that room, if I'd never opened that door, would you have told me? He didn't answer. That silence, not the previous ones, not the weighted or warm ones, but this one, the one that meant longer than you want to know, that was the answer. She turned and walked back inside. He let her go. She went to her room, closed the door, sat on the bed with her back against the headboard and her grandmother's ring turning slowly around her finger. Then she did what Nadia Solis always did when the emergency was over, and the patient was stable, and the adrenaline had nowhere left to go. She took inventory. She pulled the typed document from her pocket. She'd taken it. He'd seen her take it. Neither of them had mentioned it. And she read it again. Not the words this time. The margins. The handwriting. Red ink. Problem created. That was Dovrak's hand. But beneath it in pencil, in a different hand, precise, clean, unsentimental. Not if I get there first. Alexei's handwriting. She recognized it now. The same hand that had written the note she'd find on her kitchen counter 2 days from now. He'd been annotating Dovrak's kill order with corrections like a man editing someone else's homework. She should have been horrified. She was. And she was something else. Something she didn't have clean language for. Because the man who had manipulated her and the man who had put his body between her and a bullet were the same man, and neither version of him canceled the other out. That was the part that made it impossible to simply leave. She went back downstairs at dusk. He was still on the terrace. He had not moved, or he had moved away and returned to the same position. She couldn't tell which. And the fact that she couldn't tell felt important. She stood beside him. They looked at the garden together. I want to go home, she said. I know, and I want the truth. All of it. Not the version that protects you. The one that's actually true. He was quiet for a moment, not withholding, measuring. The way someone measures before they say something that can't be unsaid. That will take more than one conversation, he said. Then we start with the first one, she said. After I go home. She left the next morning. His car, his driver, her front door. She carried the borrowed clothes in a folded bag and left them by the entrance because they were not hers, and she intended to be precise about what was and wasn't hers from here on. Her apartment was exactly as she'd left it. Quiet, clean. Hers, on the kitchen counter, a phone. Not hers, small, matte black, with a folded note beneath it in handwriting that was clean and direct and unsentimental. The handwriting of a man who communicates to be understood, not to impress. In case the first conversation is tonight. She made coffee. She sat with it. She looked at the phone for a long time. Long enough to be honest with herself about what she was deciding. At 11:47 p.m., she picked it up. He answered before the first ring finished. Who are you? She said. Actually, a pause. Not hesitation. Consideration. That depends, he said. On whether you're asking about the man I built, or the one that's left when I take it apart. Nadia Solis. who had spent her entire adult life stabilizing things and releasing them, felt something in her chest stop moving in one direction and begin, slowly and without asking permission, to move in another. "Start from the beginning," she said. And he did. But here is what she doesn't know yet. She thinks Dovrak was the threat. She thinks the photographs were the worst of it. She thinks that getting the truth from Alexei Voss in one late-night phone call closes something. It doesn't. The man who first put Dovrak onto her is still out there. He's been watching Alexei for longer than Alexei knows. And the fact that she is now in Alexei's orbit, that she called, that he answered, that there is now a thread between them visible enough to track, means she is no longer protected. She's a target. Part 2 is coming. And in it, the question stops being, can she trust him? And becomes, can trusting him keep either of them alive? If you felt this story pulling at you, follow right now so Part 2 finds you the moment it drops. Then go to the comments and answer this. Do you think Alexei told her the truth, or only the truth that served him? I want to know where you stand. This community is divided and your answer matters. And if someone in your life would understand exactly why she made that phone call at 11:47 p.m., send this to them. They'll know why. We're just getting started.